Welcome guys to the driver rating of the Miami Grand Prix. It's that time where I go through and rate each and every one of the drivers and how they got over the whole weekend. And this one's a difficult one when we've got the sprint weekend. But firstly, let's just give a shout out to the Miami weekend. It was absolutely brilliant racing in every session. The sprint qualifying was brilliant. The sprint race was absolutely fantastic with the mixed conditions. I think every sprint race kind of needs that, doesn't it, where it forces a stop for tyres. And then the main race didn't fail to deliver at all, did it? Yes, the McLarens ran away with it in the end, but thanks to Max Verstappen with a brilliant qualifying lap to just make that race. It was just action all the way through. The Ferrari boys and their team radios was brilliant. The Williams guys defending, fighting was fantastic. We got everything. We got incident galore in the sprint as well. Alonso crashing out. What a brilliant race weekend we've had in Miami. Probably one of the best and most enjoyable sprint race weekends I can remember for a long time, and is this race of the season so far. I mean, Australia will give it a good run for its money as well, wouldn't it? But let's get into the driver ratings. As ever, we start with the race winner, Oscar the man Piastri. This guy is absolutely on fire. 4 wins this season, 3 in a row. He just looks absolutely unstoppable. For the sprint, he looked like he was on for the win there. A brilliant first corner, got the lead of Kimi Antonelli, and but for that safety car, it looked like it was his win for the taking. Unfortunately, just come home in second place, but on McLaren 1-2. What a weekend for them. A 1-2 in the race as well, but they made it hard for themselves with a poor qualifying session. Oscar Piastri started in 4th, finished in 1st in the end. He was decisive when he really needed to be. Helped out with Lando Norris. Didn't have to really battle past him. With that battle with Verstappen, meant that he was past one of his rivals, and he just made short shift of Kimi Antonelli. And then I look back because everyone's giving sort of Piastri this. He's cutthroat. He's ruthless when he comes up to Max Verstappen. I think he's one that Max struggles to have his number on. Everybody else, Max kind of knows that if I do this, they'll sort of scare him back off. Piastri just seems a lot more ruthless and fearless compared to the rest. There's just that fine line that everybody is sort of a bit scared to cross. With Oscar, Max Verstappen just seems to struggle that little bit more. I've watched it back though, and we're giving Norris criticism of how long he took over to pass Verstappen, and actually Oscar Piastri didn't do it relatively quickly anyway. By lap 10 he was in the DRS and he didn't pass him up until lap 14, so he did struggle 3 or 4 laps behind him, so much so that Norris made up places from P6 where he was down up, and he was right on the DRS of Max Verstappen as Piastri passed him. And if Norris made quick work of Verstappen, which is easier said than done, everyone would be criticising Piastri for taking too long to get past Verstappen. But the way it's gone is everyone's sort of criticising Norris, which I think when I've looked back, okay, I was probably one of those as well potentially. That does look harsh. But Piastri, once he got past Verstappen, he knew he had to put the hammer down, and boy did he do that, because within 3 laps he'd made a 9-second gap to Verstappen, and when Norris made past that pass eventually, we had a good buffer in front of him. And then when the safety cars and all that sort of stuff came out, he just had that time on his high side to, even though he had to go 1 lap extra when the VSC came out before he could pick, compared to the likes of Lewis Hamilton, who it worked out perfectly for in the race. Piastri just got the job done. It meant that the pits were then a little bit easier as well. Both McLarens could pit on the same lap, so there wasn't this issue of potentially an undercut scenario. And Piastri did an absolutely amazing job. Cool as a cucumber, this guy. He just, even when he's celebrating the win, he's just like, great job guys. And that's it. There's no over energy of emotion, or he's not too one-sided. He's just so cool. It is absolutely incredible to see such a young guy just so calm. I mean, underneath he must be nervous and all the rest of these things as drivers. He is human after all, but the way he shows that element of it is absolutely incredible. But for this weekend, I'm giving him a 10 out of 10 because it looked like for all the world he'll win the sprint. He didn't pull that off. Not just bad luck really on his part. And in the race, he was as phenomenal. The only downside for his weekend was the qualifying, where he qualified in fourth, but he sort of put that right fairly quickly in the end. A fantastic job from him. Second place man, Lando Norris, he won the sprint race thanks, like I said before, to the safety car in the end, and he got his look on the Saturday, didn't he? But on Sunday, a bit like Kimi Antonelli, we sort of said, do you pick your battle a little bit more for Verstappen? Do you, avoid getting binned on the first lap and losing 2 or 3, 4 potentially places, compared to, then just sitting in behind him and then biding your time to make that move? I think everybody, and you should make that pass. Like Lando Norris said, he'd do that again. And rightly so. You're racing drivers, you see a gap, you go for it. And if it pulls off, it does. If it doesn't, then hard luck. I mean, the alternative, like Norris was, and I've not seen him that annoyed with a Max Verstappen move, was that you said, look, I crash into him or crash into a wall. But he didn't really crash into him because, well, that would be silly. We got the car to ultimately to win the race in the end, because the McLaren's was absolutely mighty. And that cost him the win, that little moment. But it's a bit like what we said with Kimi Antonelli. I think Antonelli probably would have done that again, and Lando Norris would have done that again. He's clearly said that, and I just can't see how you wouldn't when you've got such a great run on Max Verstappen. You go for it. But after that, he was actually really, really good. Great move on Carlos Sainz, Alex Albon, George Russell, Kimi Antonelli, and then finally when he got past Max Verstappen. The only difference, got to say, is when Piastri made the move on Verstappen, and we say this is why we sort of, Norris gets a bit more criticism. He's just not as clean as he ways that cutthroat move that he makes, that Piastri makes, that Norris doesn't. And we've seen that before in the past. He just seems to make a little bit more hard work of it than he needed to. Had he made that pass 2 laps earlier, it would have been a completely different race for him, I'm sure, because he'd have been right on the tail of Piastri, because he was flying at the end. Got down to within 4 seconds of Piastri, but he left himself way too much to do, and I'm sure Oscar was, managing at that point. But he can go home with a good sprint win, a decent qualifying session as well. Just didn't put it all together, potentially because they should have been on the front row when we've seen the laps that car could do. And they've just not struggled and sort of let Verstappen in. And this is something that they kind of want to cut out if they want to go and carry on the front that they've doing, because they've got such a dominant car when it comes to race. And Norris really wants to sort of cut that out, cut any of the headache, just lead from the front and potentially just fight with his teammate if that comes to it, which is completely different, because you're not going to write each other off. Although we've seen Piastri being ruthless on that side. So looking forward to potentially seeing the two McLarens fight, and I'm sure Norris is looking forward to do that as well. He said after the race as well that he just needs to get his qualifying right, and yeah, this race showed that again, unfortunately for him. So for this weekend, I'm giving him an 8 out of 10. Third place man, George Russell, and how has he done this again? Another podium position. The VSC came out perfectly for him, and that got him the jump over Max Verstappen. But for that moment, for all the world, it looked like he'd just finished in 5th place. That's kind of where he was for much of the race. Not really behind. He was behind Kimi Antonelli. Wasn't really being able to put any pressure on him. Yeah, like I said, the VSC came out fantastically well for him. Brilliant timing on that side of garage for him. And then he got out ahead of Max Verstappen, which was crucial for him, and then Kimi Antonelli, and then managed that gap brilliant from there. But for all the world, it looked like a race, much like a sprint race, where he would be slower than his teammate. Kimi Antonelli has really outshone George Russell this weekend, but the result comes, it's George Russell standing on the podium again and not Kimi Antonelli, and that's what really counts, what you do on Sunday. But he will be a little bit concerned because Kimi has absolutely smashed it with that qualifying pole, and Russell was 5th in the sprint, finished there. Didn't look like he was anywhere close to, in race trim. That Mercedes struggled like it did last time out. They just seem to have dropped off a little bit of the McLarens and definitely the Red Bull now, looking like the 3rd best car I mean, it's not really the best, it's probably the second best car, but Max is just taking so much and doing so much with that Red Bull. It's incredible that, you know, George Russell again probably should be one a bit closer to the Red Bull. They just don't seem to have that one lap pace just yet. Although Antonelli pulled off one hell of a lap, but for George Russell's side, he's done it. A podium position, you can't grumble at that. Is a really, really solid job, and sometimes he just manages to pull this off. And for this weekend, then I'm giving him a 9 out of 10. I'm probably high rating just because he nicked that podium in the end. Fourth place finish for the pole man, Max Verstappen, in the end. He gave it absolutely everything. Turn 1, he locked up, and we've not seen that from him, but he was really hanging on to keep that. Did he bin Lando Norris off? Probably a little bit naughty. I think had he had not that deep run and the sort of little wobble mid-corner, I think he might have been a bit more trouble for that. But then he just... Thank God because he put it on pole position, but for that we wouldn't have seen the battle that we've seen with him and Piastri, and then we've seen with Lando Norris after, because the two McLarens would have walked it in the park. But Max, the ever mighty Max, you know, fought his heart out like a lion. The Dutch lion really showed and roared, didn't he, for the first 17 laps. From there on, though, he just struggled. He got undercut or, well, passed by George Russell under the VSC, and then really struggled after his pit stop because he dropped 4 or 5 seconds to Russell, and it looked like comfortable P3 and a standard P4 for Russell and then Verstappen in 4th in the end. But then really towards the end of the race, and we've seen this previously where he came back to attack and nick that podium last time, but he couldn't do that this time. Finished about 1.5 seconds of George Russell in the race. For the sprint, that was a horrible one for him. He started in 4th, and then after that 10-second penalty and the safety car finish, he basically finished last. That wasn't really his fault. The team let him out in front of Kimi Antonelli. So 2 mixed races, but then this guy just does what Max Verstappen does. I mean, his pro laps are just absolutely outstanding. He pulls that car to a place that it just shouldn't be there, and what a tremendous job he done. I'm giving him a 7 out of 10. 5th place man, Alex Albon, and what a race weekend this boy has had. He was brilliant in the sprint race, started in 8th, finished in 4th. Unfortunate for that penalty, which meant he missed out on points in the end, but for the racing part of it, he was absolutely phenomenal. And in the race, another brilliant qualifying session from him. Started in 7th, finished in 5th place. Got a good start past Carlos Sainz, and then seemed to struggle a little bit. Carlos Sainz got past him, and then them two Williams guys had a brilliant battle from there onwards. Alex Albon made the pass, and then he was comfortable. A very, very solid race from him. Not fast enough to catch the racing or Red Bull of the Verstappen, but comfortably kept the guys behind him. It was about 4.5 second gap to Kimi Antonelli in the end. This Williams was really, really strong this weekend. They're hoping it's not track specific and it's just upgrades and where they are, because they're now fighting with Mercedes and Ferrari, which is absolutely phenomenal. A brilliant 10 out of 10 weekend for me for Alex. He's been brilliant so far, and to come in against this more experienced teammate and add that pressure on him, he's really performed well. 6th place finish for Kimi Antonelli, and what a weekend this boy has had in Miami. The only shame is that he's not ended up on the podium. We'll start with the sprint with an absolutely brilliant pole lap. Just the confidence this kid has had around here has been absolutely tremendous. He's been one of the rookies that's really stood out for me. I've said it numerous times. Him and Isaac Hadjar have been fantastic. They've showed brilliant raw pace. A bit of learning to do on the racing side, but I love that, all action, go kid. But he probably should bit better temperament when he was trying to do that move on Piastri, or when he was trying to almost defend on the outside. It's a really difficult one to do, and that cost him a good handful of places. And then he got really unlucky with the Max Verstappen release, which meant he had to go around again. He finished in 10th in the end, but then picked up a couple of points, didn't he, after all the disqualifications and points and penalties in the end in that race. And then for the main race, another brilliant qualifying session to qualify in P3. The disappointment thing is that he just didn't finish on that podium, and it's his teammate that has done that. But he started off well, great start, was into P2, and then from there on he just seemed to really struggle, just seemed to get a bit too raggy. Did he just overdrive, trying to just push a bit, and didn't really have the car underneath him. He tried to hold off the two McLarens, and that was going to be a difficult job. Always the disappointment thing for him, I think, really, is he got beat by Alex Albon, and then just got unlucky that he got beat by his teammate, because for all the world, he looked like he'd be ahead of him for this race, and he was for much of the race. Just the same, the timing of the VSC just didn't really work for him. But other than that, his ranking has shot up massively after this weekend, and absolutely brilliant. He's shown that raw talent, one lap pace. Raw pace is what we look for in these rookies, and then the rest they can temper them. And that's something that, you know, we've seen with Max Verstappen over time. When he first came in, it was that raw pace that get everyone on the edge, and then he's just tempered into be, you know, multiple world champion. And this boy Kimi Antonelli has just shown that so early on in the season, round 6, and he's pulled off a pole position. The youngest man to ever do that in Formula One in any format is absolutely tremendous by like 2 years as well. It's not even like a small margin that he's managed to do that by. So massive, huge kudos for me for him. I'm giving him a 9 out of 10 because although the race finish wasn't a bit disappointing, but the pace and the talent and the, because he's a rookie as well, he's just absolutely brilliant. Hats off for me for him for this weekend. 7th place man Charles Leclerc, and what a mixer of a weekend he had. Didn't even start the sprint race, did he, when he binned it on the lap to the grid, not even the formation lap. What were they thinking putting on the Inters? Just the risk that they took when there was such a huge downpour. Really not sure why they did that. He just aquaplaned and he was just a passenger, like he said. In the race though, it just seems like Ferrari just shot themselves in the foot. Couldn't get close to the Williams for much of the race. Despite the two Williams fighting up ahead of them for most of it. Still, he pit under the safety car or VSC, and then he got past Carlos Sainz, but it was a really good battle with them in the end, which helped Lewis Hamilton through. And then seemed to have a dip in pace. I think that was because he was then on the harder tyres, which meant they just needed a bit of a warm up to build into the race. Lewis behind him, and had they worked together, could they both have got past the Williams, you know, Lewis on his fresher mediums, without being hung behind Charles Leclerc for a couple of laps, would have meant, you know, he would have had fresher tyres to go and attack Antonelli up ahead. And then as his hard tyres came into play towards the end, he would have had that pace then to also make that move. So I think a bit of teamwork there would have not gone amiss, but Charles Leclerc drives his heart out, and I can't blame him for that. He got the repass. But just a bit of scruffy weekend for the Ferrari team. Again, they just need to iron these things out and just absolutely smash it out of the park on every front. But it's been so disappointing that they were so far back, beaten by both of the Williams. Looked like they were just so far off. It's you know, big upgrades coming in Imola, and they can't come soon enough for Charles Leclerc either. For this weekend, I'm giving him a 6 out of 10. 8th place man Lewis Hamilton, and like Charles Leclerc, very contrasting sprint and race. Bit more positive on the Lewis Hamilton side with that 3rd place podium, which was absolutely incredible. It's so great to see. Such a shame that he didn't get a few more laps on that, because could he have nicked a place of the McLarens? I think, but for the Alonso crash and Norris doing that extra lap, I think he would have been under a little bit of pressure from Lewis Hamilton, and he'd had the tyres up to temperature and all that. So shame we got robbed of that a little bit, but the sprint was fantastic enough as it is, and they'd be really happy with that 3rd place on that. But then when it came to the race, I think overall he started in 12th, another poor qualifying session, but in the race he looked better, helped by the VSC that came out perfectly for him, meant that he was right behind Charles Leclerc. Just the team orders to sort of be on different tyres, different strategies. And if that had not come a bit sooner, before he, you know, overheated his tyres once you overheated the tyres, you just can't get them back. They get a curing over the top, and you lose a tyre, unfortunately, and that's happened to Lewis Hamilton. And he had to switch back in the end. I can understand his frustration for both drivers, for Lewis Hamilton and for Charles Leclerc as well. But the team radio is unlike we've heard Lewis Hamilton before. I mean, have a cup of tea before you make this decision. And do you want me to let Carlos Sainz pass as well? When they told the gap to him, he just seemed really irked by the undecisiveness that we've seen at Ferrari, and he's not used to that, because Mercedes, when they come to their decisions, have been really, really cutthroat. There's no BS when it comes to them. And there just seems to be too much dithering when we've seen at Ferrari. But yeah, a difficult weekend overall, I'd say, but with that sprint race, I'm going to give him a better rating with a 7 out of 10 for me. 9th place, Carlos Sainz, and what a weekend he had. He was action-packed throughout. Started in 15th, a poor sprint qualifying session for him, and then DNF'd in the race on the sprint race on lap 14. In the main race, though, what a brilliant qualifying session again, P6. Absolutely tremendous job, and in the race he looked so fiery and feisty. Brilliant battles with Alex Albon, and then he got really close up to the back of George Russell, just couldn't get that pass on him. Had he done that, I think he would have done for a much better finishing position. And then he had that battle with Charles Leclerc, and he got mugged a little bit by the two Ferraris, but he fought his heart out, and then came back with that massive dive bomb on Lewis Hamilton. I think, did he get a penalty? I'm not too sure of that in the end, but he was finished 0.3 behind. I think he got away with a penalty actually, in fact, on that, because they sort of looked at Lewis Hamilton closed and turned into that corner a bit earlier than Carlos Sainz expected. Had Lewis not done that, I think he might have just nicked that position off him right at the end. But Williams and Carlos Sainz I think overall he might be disappointed actually, which shows how good this Williams car has been this weekend. 9th place and 2 points. For most weekends they'll be going away fairly happy with that, but for this weekend they looked absolutely like they had the two Ferraris in the pockets, and for Sainz to just finish behind them, I think he'll be a little bit disappointed. But his qualifying sessions were brilliant. It was really, really good to see him fighting up at the front and beating his old team as well at one point. It was absolutely brilliant. I'm giving him an 8 out of 10 still though for this weekend, because I was just so impressed with the Williams guys. 10th place man, Yuki Tsunoda, and he's had a bit of a disappointing weekend. His sprint race weekend didn't start off well at all, did it? A poor sprint qualifying session out in Q1, and then recovered really well actually to come back into P9, but no points for him on the sprint day. In the race though as well, he got past Ocon and then was up into P9, and then just couldn't close on Charles Leclerc. Was in no man's land a little bit on there, and then he got that 5-second penalty, which he meant he just about held on about 2/10 to Isaac Hadjar in the end. I'm surprised he pulled out that pace in the end, because Isaac Hadjar had got within that 5-second gap with a couple of laps to go, so he must have pulled off some phenomenal laps to hold on to that 10th and 1 point. But now he's been in this car a little bit, I think he just needs to make that next step up and get a bit closer, because the gap from him to Verstappen has just grown. It looked like 8 and 9 tenths of a second now, so wants to get back to within at least as a bare minimum half a second, but really within 2-3 tenths of Max Verstappen, because Max is doing Max things, but the second driver just needs to be that much closer, and Yuki just seems to have gone a little bit further away from him this weekend, and it was a tough one. I'm giving him a 4 out of 10. 11th place man, Isaac Hadjar, and again he's shown he's got the qualifying places. Sprint qualifying with 9th place was brilliant, but the race didn't start too well. He got passed by Liam Lawson. It was a bit of a struggle from him from there, and then what did he finish in 13th place? It's a bit disappointing in the sprint. For the qualifying, he finished and started in 11th, finished in 11th. I think the only disappointment is that he's just finished 2 tenths off a point and beating Yuki Tsunoda, and that would have been a brilliant job to beat his potential rival for that Red Bull seat. I mean, he was very wise in sort of saying, it's too early for me yet for this Red Bull seat. Yuki's just got it. Let him have the crap car, and when it comes and the new regulation changes, and it might suit the second driver a little bit more than it does when it's completely. You've got to match Max Verstappen's front end driving, which just seems absolutely just phenomenal if you can get it right, but difficult for anyone but Max to do that. And he was very wise in sort of saying that. But this weekend, good 1 lap pace again, especially with his qualifying laps, but in the race it'd be just a little bit disappointed, and especially not to come home with some points. A very weekend for him. I'm giving him a 5 out of 10. 12th place finisher Esteban Ocon, and it was just an absolutely outstanding qualifying session to qualify him in 9th place for the race, but then he just dropped back. Didn't really have the pace in the race at all, and it showed again. It was much like the sprint race where, I mean, he qualified well in 12th and went backwards in that race as well. He finished in 14th in the sprint, but in the race as well, it just seems like he really just outdid that car. It didn't look like it was in for the top 10 finish at all, but Ocon with another very good qualifying session, which was kind of what we wanted him to see. He got in the DRS of Isaac Hadjar, but it just looked like he just, you know, couldn't quite have that car underneath him to make that pass. A difficult weekend, but the car just wasn't quite there, but you can be happy with his, like, he looked like he maximised everything, especially with that quali lap. I've given him a 6 out of 10 for this weekend. 13th place man, Pierre Gasly, and it's been a difficult weekend for the Alpines. I expected a little bit better from him for this weekend. In the sprint race, he started 13th, finished 11th at the end. Probably was hoping for a little bit more, but that's kind of all she wrote. In the main race, a pit lane start and 14th place or 13th place finish, should I say. I suppose you can be happy with that. He went very, very long on the first stint. They picked under the Bortoleto VSC. He missed the first one. It was a bit brave of them. But then again, he came out in no man's land. He was 8 seconds to P12 Ocon, and he had a 5-second gap to Nico Hulkenberg, who was fast behind him. But yeah, difficult to say. From pits to P13, I think generally you'd say most people would be happy with that. But they've been fighting for points, haven't they, earlier on in the season? And so they'd probably go home a little bit disappointed because it didn't look like any points were on the card for him for this weekend. But pits to P30, I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10. Maybe a bit generous, that. 14th place man, Nico Hulkenberg, started in 16th, made up a couple of places in the race. I'm not sure why this guy never put it on the safety car or the virtual safety car. I don't know if he just missed the Bortoleto one because he went super, super long and then just pit and, you know, lost a load of time in the pits. And then he came out, was flying. He had about 7 seconds to make up to Pierre Gasly, but couldn't do that in the end. Not surprised in that car. In the sprint, though, we had a really good qualifying session to get that car in 11th place, but finished 12th in the end. That car just not quite there yet, is it, to pick up some good points? But is this kind of back to where we've usually seen them? Obviously 14th place finish, obviously that's helped with 4 DNFs up ahead as well, so probably just looks better than we've normally say, you know, 17th 18th place finishes. But yeah, difficult weekend, but for a decent sprint, I'm giving him a 4 out of 10 for this weekend. 15th place finish for Fernando Alonso. Started in 17th, made up 2 places in the end, but I think that's all down to DNFs. He absolutely struggled in this car. He made a mistake in the race, as we've seen in the sprint, and it's a shame because it looked like that car was good at the sprint. Looked at, you know, they were in for P8, potentially P7, going well in points, comfortable, at least 1 point for Fernando Alonso, and then dropped it and missed out there, where his teammate made it to the finish line and brought up some good points for Aston Martin, especially with the point or the penalties ahead that, you know, promoted them, especially Stroll in the end. Fernando missed out on that, and again in the race, not the usual Fernando Alonso we see. We don't really see this guy make mistakes like that, so just like the car was struggling, and they were just absolutely miles back. They just had no pace, 20 seconds behind Nico Hulkenberg, and they both finished a lap down, and this car just looks an absolute dog. And this is probably the worst showing we've seen by a country mile, but a 3 out of 10 for me for this weekend. 16th place finish for Lance Stroll, started in 18th. A really difficult race again for him, like his teammate. Despite Alonso going for a spin, Lance Stroll still finished behind him. He was about 7.5 seconds behind Fernando Alonso as well. Just had no pace. A big contrast though to what his sprint race was like. His sprint qualifying wasn't great either, where he started in 16th place, but to come home in 6th in the end was an absolutely brilliant job. He timed the pit stop on lap 11 like Lewis Hamilton in the sprint absolutely perfectly, and came home and picked up some much needed points for him. The only sort of positive out of the weekend for him really, but in the main race he was absolutely nowhere. I've given him a 2 out of 10 for the main race, but he did you know, do much better for me, in my opinion, in the sprint, and I gave him a 8 out of 10. So it's another one that for him is really, really difficult, because you're going from a 2 in the main race and an 8 in the sprint. So I'm going to give him a 5 out of 10. That's probably just down to the sprint race, because otherwise in the main race he was, yeah, shocking. And then we get to the DNFs. Jack Doohan on lap 1, really unlucky for him. Not an awful lot he could have done. He was so far wide and away from Liam Lawson that he just absolutely had nowhere to go. A racing incident in that one. In the sprint, though, he's qualified in 17th, finished in 16th in the end. Yeah, surprised he just wasn't one of the first to pit in that race, because he just looked like he absolutely had nothing to lose. So they got that wrong on that side. I only gave him a 4 out of 10 for the sprint. A difficult weekend. Rumours are that, potentially Franco Colapinto could be lined up into that car for Imola. So is this his last race for the Alpine? Let's watch the space for him. I kind of hope he gets a bit more time, because there's been moments of really good pace for him. Just that he's had a big crash and just off performances like this, and another DNF for him. So yeah, let's hope he's still in the seat. It looks like it's going to be a difficult one. I've given him low rating overall for the race. Like I said, I just gave him a 4 out of 10 for the sprint. Next up, the DNF of Ollie Berman. He had a particularly tough weekend in some parts, especially when it came to qualifying. Just couldn't get a lap around here. Qualified 19th for the race, and then he had that DNF, but the engine just went. Unlucky on that one, but it's been a struggle this qualifying, because even for the sprint he was last. But what a race he had in the sprint, with a brilliant move and brave move between two drivers. We've seen that end in tears so many times when they sort of just get squeezed, don't they, and lose a wing or a wheel, but he pulled it off and made up 2 places, and then just was flying, got the strategy absolutely bang on like the rest, and an excellent P8 finish, but for the penalty, which meant he missed out in the end, and that would have been a really, really good points for him. So I gave him an 8 out of 10 for the sprint. No rating for the DNF for the main race, so another one that's difficult to rate, but I don't think he deserves an 8 overall, because qualifying was poor and he wasn't really anywhere in the race until he had that DNF. So I'm going to give him a 5 out of 10. Next up is Gabby Bortoletto. He had the engine failure on lap 31, but he had a very, very good qualifying session to get that car in P13 for the race, and then struggled in the race, was going backwards, a bit like the sprint. The only thing I said he good about that was he just didn't finish last. He started 19th, finished 15th in the end. Obviously, we've got a few DNFs and all that sort of stuff on that side. So, yeah, difficult weekend for him. He's shown, again, he's got raw pace, and that's what we kind of need to see in these rookies. But he's had a couple of dips for the main races so far in the last couple of weekends. He just needs to get through with a really good, clean weekend this time out. And the last of the DNFs, Liam Lawson, who did not finish on lap 39. He had that lap 1 incident with Jack Doohan, and he had a massive hole. It was going to be a struggle when you lose that much aero points, but it was way back in his qualifying, which will be his disappointment start for the race. But he's another one that's difficult to rate. I didn't give him any rating for the race because of the DNF. But in the sprint, he was another one, phenomenal drive. He was qualified in 14th, finished in 7th, but it was that silly dive bomb that he did on Fernando Alonso, which meant he got a penalty and cost him points. And that's put a real downer on his weekend, because he would have gone home with at least a couple of points with that P7 and some positivity of one good sprint race. But now he's gone away with no points in that and a DNF overall. So I gave him a 6 out of 10 overall for this weekend, and that's the full 20 drivers done. Let's get to the predictions review, and it's been a better one for me this weekend. For the sprint qualifying, I had Norris, Piastri, Verstappen. I could never have predicted Kimi Antonelli to pull off a lap like that. That was absolutely outstanding from the youngster. Piastri did get second. Verstappen had third, but it was Lando Norris. For the sprint, I had Lando Norris to win the race. I thought Verstappen would come home in second, but he had a real struggle. Didn't expect him for any of the world to finish 17th. I don't think many would have. It was Piastri second with a McLaren 1-2. They were dominant. And a surprise, Lewis Hamilton in third. I had Piastri in that. For qualifying, I had Max Verstappen to take pole position because I just thought he's a genius and he's did it again with a brilliant lap. Second place, I had Oscar Piastri, but it was Lando Norris that beat Piastri in qualifying. And I thought it would be George Russell in third place, but it was the other Mercedes man. Kimi Antonelli was absolutely outstanding. He was, a real joy to watch and see him do so well. For the race, I thought Piastri would take the win. He absolutely did that. And I thought Max Verstappen would do better, come home in second. But Lando Norris, with a real decent drive in the end, to come and nick that point. I had Norris to take third place, but obviously that was George Russell that did that in the end. Predicted a good weekend for the McLarens, 2-1-2s. You can't knock that. That was a brilliant weekend. I did predict a good weekend for the Alpines as well, but they kind of really struggled here this weekend. Didn't expect him to go as badly as they did. I thought it'd be a bad weekend for the Racing Bulls and the Ferraris, and I'm going to take all the plaudits for that one. Yes, it was a bad weekend for the Racing Bulls, and they looked off the pace and didn't look like they were in the fight for any points at any point. And the Ferraris, not much you can say that's been positive. Leclerc crashed in before the sprint, and then we got just miles back to finish, a minute back of the two McLarens. They've got a really hope that the Imola upgrades really do work for them. And there we have it. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment. As always, watch out for the Imola preview that's going to come on the Monday before before the race kicks off. We've got a 2-week gap for Imola. Everyone will be bringing upgrades there, and it'll be a different race and different dynamics of where we might see everybody line up. I can't wait for the action to get going there. The first of another triple header next time we go, Imola, Monaco, and then Spain. So it should be a cracker. Can't wait for the action to get going there. Let me know what your thoughts on the driver ratings. Do you agree? Who do you think I got absolutely massively wrong? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Love watching and reading them and responding. See you in the next one.